We're now on the final stage of getting the lining into place and finishing the jacket. So here we have the front inside of the jacket, and that's the front facing. And what I've done is if you've been doing the tailored version, you'll remember there were stitches that ran all the way down the hair canvas up to the shoulder, and also onto around the shoulder itself here. And what I've done is I've taken those out. I've literally taken all of those hand stitches and the basting out from there, so it's no longer showing on the front, which is great. And now I've also pinned the side seam of the lining to the side seam of the garment, and I've just lined up the center seam there with the one underneath, and then I've pinned it in place, and I'm going to use very long running stitches just to hold that in place. So they're loose, they're not pulling, they're just going to hold it and support it at the side seams. Now, the one thing you need to remember is you don't want to be stitching to the very bottom, so you need to leave roughly 4 inches, I beg your pardon, 4 inches there, which is about 10 centimeters, where the lining is left free. So I'm going to get on and do that hand stitching on both of the sides seams, and I'll show you that in a moment. So there you can see the running stitches that I've made along there. They're very loose, there's no pulling, and I've stopped them 4 inches, 10 centimeters before the bottom and up to the armhole there. And that's what it should look like. Just to show you what I've done so far to attach the lining to the jacket. So what I've done here is, the first step was to pin the fabric. I turned over the edge and then I pinned it in place around the neckline here to there. I then started under the sleeve, because remember we'd already attached the lining to the underarm, to the side seams, and then I've lined up around there and I've pinned that to the seam line all up to here, and then around the front as well. Once I've got back to the top, I then folded over the piece at the back, slipped the front lining underneath there, pinned it in place, and then I've just hand basted that in place with these long running stitches, just enough to hold it in place but left the other pins in place there. And the reason for that is I now need to do the front of the jacket. But then I thought, as I was basting it, I thought, I'd really like to do a nice finish on the edge. The other side, to show you how to do this technique, I've tapered it up to the edge, so that's, I don't want anything of this bias binding showing past the shoulder. And then I have lined it up with the edge of the fabric. And remember, this is 3/4 of an inch, so if I do a 5/8 of an inch seam, I'm going to end up with 1/4 of an inch, 6 millimeters of the bias binding showing when I turn it over the other way. So I have pinned it all the way down here. I've got to the end, and I just need to cut off the remainder of that bias binding, so I will do that in a moment. So I'm going to stitch that 5/8 of an inch from the edge. It'll catch in this edge, so I won't be left with anything loose or raw once I turn it over. And when I turn it over, I'll have a really lovely 1/4 of an inch of the satin showing on the other side. So that's what I'm going to do next. So I've sewn up the top little part there, and I'm just going to carry on sewing down here. I'm using the edge of the foot that I have here as my guide as to how much of the ribbon I want to be showing. I'm stitching 5/8 of an inch from the edge of the fabric. It's a really easy technique to do. So don't be scared. And as always, I'm working down the fabric so I have consistent seams. And I'll show you how that all turns out in a minute. It's sewn in down the lining to the bottom, and what will happen is I'll then turn that over, press it, and you'll just see that edge and a really nice finish on the lining. I've pinned the front of the lining to the facing, and I'm now going to baste that into place, and then I'll sew around the arms. Okay, I just wanted to show you how to do slip stitch if you didn't know already. And this is the stitch that I'm using to invisibly attach the lining to the jacket. So I've already gone around the neck here and down the other side, but I got a new thread, so I'm starting on this section here. So what you do is, I've already brought the thread through the edge of the lining and tape there. So I would just, right next to that stitch, I'm going to take a couple of threads of the coat material, and then at the same, virtually at the same place, I'm just going to poke the needle through the lining, underneath that, through that crease there, and then bring it out. It's about 1/4 of an inch. Oh, this thread here is getting in the way. Let me pull that out of the way. It's about 1/4 of an inch. There. And repeat. So right next to that stitch, take a couple of threads, then go into the lining where the crease is, and then just bring it right out at the edge. A couple of threads through there, out, and then that just holds that in place, and you can't see those stitches. And once you're actually wearing the jacket, I mean, the shame is that you can't see the lining then either, unless you keep flapping it, which I might turn to do. And sew on. It's a really great stitch. It's good for hemming. As long as you don't take too much of the outside fabric, it's fine. But, and especially for lining, I always prefer to put my lining in by hand. I feel I get a neater finish. And that's it. And there you see, you can't see those stitches. You may see the little, just the little indentations where the stitches are, but in the grand scheme of things, that's a really good finish. And here we have it. I've turned the jacket back inside out again so that you can see the lining. There on the shoulder, I did the same on the shoulder. I used the slip stitch and then across the back. Again on this shoulder, matching up with that seam. And there it is. And I defy anybody to see the stitches on there. And there we have it. So next step, sleeves.